So managing risk within the lease agreement and ensuring that you've got enough to be able to cover any risk or any issues that occur with your tenant can be done within the lease agreement. There is a level of risk, of course, because if you intend for the tenant to self-fund their potential eviction, as an example, the collection of rent that they owe, then you're going to be waiting a long time in order to gather enough funds in order to be able to use their funding in order to be able to achieve these results. What we often see in practice, so for starters, there's nothing that restricts a lease agreement from making other provisions, from having certain charges like that, as an example, that the tenant undertakes. Because remember, you can charge whatever rent you want. Nothing stops you from charging double the rent if you must. There are certain provisions in the Rental Housing Act, albeit, that prevent unfair practices and unfair treatment. That is absolutely correct. But market value of rent isn't easy to determine. And a market value can easily be 5,000 Rand or 6,000 Rand. So there are circumstances where the actual determination of rental isn't exact. And in circumstances where you may find yourself with a higher risk tenant, of course, you're allowed to charge a little bit extra because you factor in that risk to the rental. And it's quite as simple as that. So yes, it is possible to charge slightly more for a tenant that might be more high risk. But unfortunately, that in itself is a risk, because how do you ensure that this tenant pays beyond simply 1 month after moving in? So you have to bear this in mind. There are products in the market at the moment that allow for a landlord to insure the rental. So things like rental guarantees. And in fact, there's products in the market right now that actually advance deposits and make provision for the funding of things like double deposits. So Preferental, which is a letting agency, but also a software platform that works with many letting agencies, they actually provide these insurance products independently. So you don't have to approach them to manage your property. It's DIY. You can simply approach them for vetting, for the deposit insurance, for the double deposits, for rental guarantees. So there are different options that a landlord has in order to mitigate their risk of sitting with a bad tenant. But one of those, unfortunately, which is charging extra rent in order to mitigate the risk, is a little bit of a problem because rent is payable in smaller portions. Maybe if it was an advance for a year, one could argue that that mitigates some level of risk. But if it's a small amount every month, it's going to take you extremely long to get to a point where you've saved up enough money in order to be able to take legal action against this tenant, recover lost rental, and possibly have to deal with damage to the property. So be very, very careful in trying to DIY that.